Hello, welcome to episode 4 of my podcast. And today I'm going to be talking about two life altering events that happened to me musically as I was growing up. The first event was on the summer of 1978 when I was 7 years old. And my sister took me to see the movie Grease. And I just loved the music for it. I loved the movie, and we used to actually watch that movie repeatedly because I'd ask her to bring me back to it, and we would watch it in the drive-in, just like the scene in the movie where they were in the drive-in. We would watch it, and my favorite part of Grease was like the cartoons on it. I remember like the soft drink, and when they were going to get a break, when he's at the drive-in, they have the concession stand cartoons. I really liked that a lot, and the song itself was one of my all-time favorites, and still very much is. The music was fabulous on that, and I really never even thought of Grease as a musical when I was seeing it, as a child at 7 years old. And the next really life-altering event that I had was when I was about 13 years or old or so, and I was my brother had just come home from the Marines, and he had a little Datsun car, and I would rummage through the car looking for change, so I could go get some candy or whatever the case might be. When I was 13 years old, and I opened his glove box and I found three cassettes in there that really altered my life. I, immediately took them and started trying to listen to them. And the first cassette that he had was Black Sabbath Paranoid. The second cassette he had was Motley Crue's Shout at the Devil. And the third cassette he had was Van Halen's Fair Warning. I mean, all of these are fabulous, monumental albums. And as a kid, I remember I had just very cheap cassette players, the little handheld ones, and I stuck in I think the A side, whatever it was, that had Red Hot on it from Motley Crue. And I remember listening to it, thinking, "Oh my God!" I thought that the cassette was playing at a wrong speed. To be honest with you, at the beginning of it, like it was trying to stretch out the tape, and I popped it out, popped it back in, and I was like, I couldn't believe it. It was like my very first introduction into heavy metal, and I was just totally hooked immediately. And I just, from that point on, I started telling all my friends, and like, and this is probably like early or summer of 1983, and we were all at that point, just totally into Motley Crue and the birth of heavy metal into our mind. At that point, I can't really remember a lot of heavy metal that I was listening to prior to this experience that happened to me. In freshman year of 1986, I started the songwriting process when I was 15 years old, and um, the very first song that I started was a song entitled Lust for Life, as in, lust, as in what it is. And then the next song I wrote was Warpath in January of 1987. That's really when I started rolling. I just had only started on a song in 86. And I wrote through high school, and by the time 1990 rolled around, when I was 20 years old, I had quite a fair amount of songs wrote, and then I had another life-altering event when I was 20. I seen the movie Henry and June with Uma Thurman, who also is the same age as me, just for reference. And that kind of really opened my mind when I seen that movie to a different form of writing, and I kind of, really had the desire to be like Henry Miller and just write a little bit of a romance and and stuff like that, stuff that women might be more interested in than besides heavy metal. And that's really 1990 was when I really started doing the poetry writing process, which was to me at the time very, very, very much different than songwriting. I mean, it was much more liberating, and I didn't really have to have the structure that I used for songwriting in poetry. I was just free to do whatever I wanted. It's just which I really liked that aspect of it, and I still do. And that was how I got started in poetry writing. The only really introduction to poetry that I had was in high school when I read a little bit of Robert Frost's poems, and that's really all I could remember when I started writing poetry. And my experience with Robert Frost and reading them, like footprints in the snow and stuff like that, I just found it insanely boring. I really didn't appreciate it whatsoever for probably what it really was. Um, so when I started writing, I started reading Jim Morrison's poetry books like Wilderness and An American Night. And I mean, his poetry, to me was a pretty hit and miss, but nonetheless, I developed my style from trying to read his and just try to branch out from there. It was really the only reference I had when I started doing my poetry. And then, kind of as I got into the process a little bit more, like down the line a little bit, I started to read a little bit more poetry. And what I soon found out was that I pretty much immediately stopped reading it because I really didn't want to be influenced by it whatsoever. I mean, I really didn't want it to alter what I was trying to do. So I just really thought it was best to try and write poetry from just my own innate sense of what I felt that it should be without trying to read others and to try and really analyze what they were trying to do. So most of my poetry is all just created out of pure creativity and really doesn't have a whole lot of influence from outside sources. My influences as far as writing songs and the musical process are all over the place. I liked Pink Floyd. Everyone in high school that was into heavy metal still appreciated Pink Floyd for what they were. They were the one band that even people that were into metal really appreciated. I always loved Motley Crue since the moment I heard them. Vince was my favorite singer. They kind of fell off quite a bit after the Theater of Pain album, and even when I heard Theater of Pain, I was slightly a little disappointed, but although it was still really good. Um, I liked Metallica quite a bit in the 80s, Slayer, and the very high end of heavy metal. And as far as my writing influences, stuff like The Doors, even country type of stuff was a pretty big influence, like Waylon Jennings and stuff like that. I really enjoyed watching the Dukes of Hazzard when I was young, and it obviously had an impact on some of my writing. The Waylon Jennings aspect of Dukes of Hazzard, and it just bounced around all over. I really wasn't in any specific genre. I just went up and down the line all over. I wanted complete freedom to be able to do anything, all the way into the aspects of jazz and writing jazz songs and everything. The Beatles, the Rolling Stones, War. War was a huge influence. I really loved them. I mean, musically, I thought they were probably the best of all of them. I loved the rhythm. I loved funk. The Commodores and the Temptations. I loved all of them. And so, really, I mean, all aspects of the history of music, of rock and roll, I really enjoyed all the way back to, Dale Shannon and She's My Little Runaway. I mean, it was really not so much the music that influenced me. I always looked at things from a songwriting perspective, and I needed to have good words in my music, or it would really do nothing for me. And if I had a singer where I couldn't understand the words, I mean, that was just awful to me. I really had no interest in that, you know. I remember seeing the band Rigor Mortis at First Avenue. I didn't understand a single word this guy said the entire concert, and I just thought it was just the most horrible music statement that I'd ever heard. It was just horrible. You know, I didn't appreciate it whatsoever. But I, since, you know, as I got older, learned to really like music that didn't have any words in it. Obviously, a lot of jazz has very little words in it, but I still like it. Just that for me, I was never a musician. I was always a songwriter, so the songwriting always came first to me. That was the most important aspect of the song, was the songwriting, and that was what drawed me in, and what really sparked my imagination. At this current point in time of January of 2024, I'm up to about 260 songs wrote, which expands from 1987 on through 2024. I have about, I don't know the exact amount of poems, but I got about 3 books worth that are complete that I'm going to be publishing very soon here. Most of these books have all been written for quite a long period of time, and my neglect has prevented them from getting out to the public in the time that they really should have. And but nonetheless, I'll get them published and get them out there. And probably the total poems are got to be like 100, 150. So, and as I go along in these videos, I'm gonna try and describe to you some songwriting workshops, some ideas, some thoughts on songwriting, and some thoughts on poetry, and you know, really just in general the different approaches to the 2 different forms of writing, and maybe even some writing on some other subjects such as you know, stories and stuff like that. I've basically written all of it, and really the big thing that I can tell you as a writer is you need to do it often. You don't want to lose your gift, and it takes quite a while to try and develop your style and really what you're trying to go for. I mean, some of my most favorite things that I've wrote are very, very deep into my musical writing career. I mean, it took me a long time to get to that stage, you know, where I used a higher elevation, a higher ground of consciousness, you know, and you can't really just get there with a shortcut, you know. It really takes a long, long process to be able to understand really what you want to be doing, and to really move your ability to the next level. You know, you can't become Eddie Van Halen as a musician, you know, with like a few months of practice. I mean, it's going to take a little bit of longer period than that.
I believe in you. And I believe you'll be needing this. Hang on to that. It is a mighty instrument.